Russia has a new experimental weapon, Oryashnik, which travels at the hypersonic speed of Mach 10, making it unstoppable, according to Russians. During its terminal approach, the missile's warheads reach 4,000 degrees Celsius, almost as hot as the surface temperature of the sun. Russians claim that no other country possesses a weapon like Oryashnik. In fact, this weapon has become so popular in Russia that parents are naming their children after it, and government officials are proposing to name streets in the honor of Oryashnik's engineers. Russian television claims that Oryashnik, which means hazelnut tree in Russian, has entered the global lexicon, much like Sputnik once did. Meanwhile, Oryashnik-themed t-shirts have become a major trend in Russia, with even a member of the parliament wearing a shirt labeled Tough Nut, featuring President Putin depicted as Bruce Willis. There is just one small thing missing from Russia's new Wunderwaffe. Where is all the damage? Of course, Russia claims the damage is all underground, and we'll discuss that too. But after spending countless hours researching this topic, analyzing satellite imagery, and piecing together everything I could find about Oryashnik, this weapon still remains a bit of a mystery. The only thing we know for sure is that Oryashnik is a dual-purpose missile, meaning that it's capable of carrying both nuclear and conventional payloads. This makes it especially dangerous, because it can kill us all, seriously. But not for the reasons that you think. It's been nearly 2 months since the first Oryashnik attack. The Russian government has released a few slides on its website detailing Oryashnik's characteristics, such as its speed, range, and payload capacity. Based on publicly available information, our best estimate is that Oryashnik is likely the RS-26 Rubyezh, a mobile experimental IRBM program that began in 2008. While the program was officially put on hold in 2018, it was revived after the United States suspended the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in February 2019, which prompted Russia to withdraw from the treaty and resume the Rubyezh program. On November 20th, 2024, the American Embassy in Ukraine issued a statement warning of a possible Russian attack. The embassy was promptly closed, and all American citizens in Ukraine were advised to seek shelter if they heard air raid sirens. This is while Ukrainians circulated information suggesting that Russia might deploy the RS-26 Rubyezh just one day before its anticipated launch. On November 21, 2024, Russia launched the Oryashnik missile toward Dnipro, with multiple videos capturing the impacts. Ukrainians initially claimed that the Oryashnik was an intercontinental ballistic missile, but a few hours after the attack, the Pentagon confirmed that this new experimental missile was in fact an intermediate-range ballistic missile with a range of 3,400 miles, based on the RS-26 Rubyezh. Later that day, President Vladimir Putin issued a statement declaring that Russia had deployed its latest medium-range missile system, carrying a non-nuclear hypersonic ballistic missile named Oryashnik. President Putin explained that the launch was a response to the deployment of American and British long-range weapons, specifically ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles, against military installations in Kursk and Bryansk regions. In essence, this was a warning to the West for crossing the red lines by enabling Ukraine to strike deep into Russian territory with the help of Western missiles. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, Oryashnik's warheads carried no explosives. Instead, the damage was generated purely by kinetic energy of the warheads, which struck their targets at Mach 10. It remains unclear whether the warheads were entirely inert or especially hardened to penetrate underground structures. Even more intriguing than the missile itself is what Oryashnik was carrying. In the circulated videos, we can observe 6 distinct impacts involving multiple submunitions, suggesting the use of multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. This marks the first use of an IRBM equipped with conventional MIRV warheads in combat. But is Oryashnik really hypersonic? And more importantly, is it actually impossible to intercept it? Technically speaking, Oryashnik is a hypersonic missile. Anything traveling above Mach 5 meets the definition. However, since the term hypersonic has entered mainstream usage, it's been often used to make weapons sound more formidable. In reality, all ICBMs, including the Minuteman III from the 1960s, have warheads that re-enter the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds, sometimes as fast as Mach 20. That said, a true hypersonic missile typically refers to an air-breathing missile powered by a scramjet engine or similar technology, capable of sustained flight at speeds above Mach 5 while operating high in the atmosphere. By that standard, calling Oryashnik hypersonic is about as accurate as calling a meteorite hypersonic as it falls down to Earth. According to President Putin, air defense systems currently available in the world and missile defense systems being created by the Americans in Europe cannot intercept such missiles. It is impossible. But let's examine that. Oryashnik follows a ballistic trajectory that includes 3 phases: the boost phase, mid-course phase, and terminal phase. Theoretically, this missile could be intercepted during its boost phase, which lasts about 60 seconds. However, this would require being close to Oryashnik's launch site in Russia, making its intercept unlikely. Exoatmospheric air defense systems, such as the SM-3 missile, Israel's Arrow 3, or the American ground-based interceptor, could intercept Oryashnik during its mid-course phase. This is the part of the flight where the missile's bus, which carries the warheads, spends several minutes in space. However, even if you overlook the geographic and range limitations of these interceptors, they only provide some chance of a successful intercept. For example, if the United States launches one of its 44 ground-based interceptors, there's only a 56% chance of intercepting an ICBM during its mid-course phase. If 4 interceptors are launched, the probability of a successful intercept increases to 97%. During the terminal phase of Oryashnik's flight, intercepting it becomes exponentially more difficult. That's because when Oryashnik releases its warheads, there are dozens of targets to contend with, including decoys. Oryashnik's warheads are actually 6 submunition-carrying canisters, which can maneuver. We know this for certain because debris from these canisters has been recovered, revealing a gas generation chamber and one of the 6 control nozzles used to steer the canister. At an unknown altitude, these 6 canisters release their MIRV submunitions, which based on the videos appear to lack the ability to maneuver or engage multiple targets independently. Instead, they strike the target area in a linear pattern. This next part is kinda important, because in his address on November 21st, 2024, President Putin misspoke. He said that missiles attack targets at a speed of Mach 10, which is 2.5 to 3 kilometers per second. But Mach 10 is actually 3.43 kilometers per second. Now, it's true that in space or in high atmosphere, the missiles might travel at Mach 10. But during re-entry to a denser atmosphere, it will slow down. So if the submunition is indeed a MIRV and travels at 2.5 kilometers per second, which is Mach 7.2, it would mean that Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, could potentially intercept it, since THAAD travels at Mach 8.2. I realize that I'm saying a lot of ifs and buts, but it seems plausible that THAAD could intercept some of the submunitions and likely not all of them. Plus, this interception would be incredibly difficult and extremely costly, making it practically impractical. So when President Putin says it's impossible to intercept Oryashnik, at least in the context of Ukraine, which doesn't have any of these defense systems, he is 100% correct. But the question of interception may not even matter, because as you're about to see, so far there is zero credible evidence that Oryashnik can cause any significant damage. The target of Oryashnik's attack was the Pivdenmash factory, also known as Yuzhmash, located in Dnipro, Ukraine. During the Soviet era, Pivdenmash was one of the largest producers of Soviet ICBMs, including the SS-18 Satan. At its peak, the factory produced about 120 missiles per year, roughly one every 3 days. According to the Russians, the factory now manufactures the Ukrainian Hrim-2 and Neptune missiles. However, after the Oryashnik attack, the Russian media claimed that the factory had been wiped off the face of the earth. Of course, once the first satellite imagery surfaced, it was clear that the plant was still intact, with speculations pointing to Oryashnik striking a dark area north of the factory. As the satellite imagery became public, the Russian media began promoting a new narrative that the real target was the underground communications in the factory. Additionally, some Russian experts argued that Oryashnik had destroyed the underground missile factory workshops. See, for decades, there have been claims that the above-ground factory at Pivdenmash is just the tip of the iceberg, with most of its production actually located deep underground. After all, this used to be a secret and strategically important facility for the Soviet Union. These rumors suggested that the Soviets had built the factory to withstand a nuclear attack, with multiple underground levels reinforced by thick concrete. Initially, I was highly skeptical of this. However, a potential clue about the existence of underground facilities at Pivdenmash comes from Azovstal in Mariupol, which is known to have miles of underground tunnels and bunkers capable of withstanding a nuclear attack. So given the critical role that Pivdenmash played in producing ICBMs for the Soviet Union, it seems unlikely that it wouldn't have similar underground structures, just like Azovstal does. Another clue came from an employee who in an interview initially dismissed the idea of an underground factory, calling it a legend, but then quickly mentioned that there are indeed some underground structures. What exactly lies beneath Pivdenmash, I can't say for sure, but I strongly believe there is something there. But the most puzzling mystery to me is where exactly Oryashnik hit and what kind of damage it caused. According to a blog post by Americaniads, who purchased high-resolution imagery of Pivdenmash from the November 22, 2024 pass, there was no new damage to the plant compared to the October 22 pass. All the damage visible in the November 22 imagery was from previous strikes accumulated over the past 2.5 years. If you're interested, I highly recommend you check out this article. The fact that only old damage was visible in the November 22 imagery was also pointed out on X. The author speculates that either Oryashnik completely missed the plant, or that no damage is visible in that satellite image, or that perhaps satellite providers are concealing the data. Not satisfied with those explanations, I purchased the same image myself, but with larger boundaries. I also obtained an image from the January 4, 2025 pass, which in my opinion rules out any cover-up by satellite imagery providers, because the old damage was identical in both images. But did Oryashnik miss the plant and strike somewhere outside of it? After carefully examining the image, I was able to pinpoint one possible impact zone of Oryashnik's submunitions, located roughly 1 kilometer north of the plant. Interestingly, this building was also featured on both TV and in newspapers, where it was claimed to be the site of an RS-26 Rubish missile strike. I even managed to find this footage on Getty Images and purchased it for you to see. It wasn't cheap, so I hope you find it helpful. Now, the damage doesn't look apocalyptic by any means, which raises the question, was it really the submunitions that hit the building? Or was it just part of the maneuverable container that was carrying them? The scorch marks on the grass, spanning nearly 500 feet, suggest that it's possible that multiple submunitions struck the area, but I can't say for certain. The Ukrainian Emergency Services also released several images of the damage to a garage cooperative located 400 meters north of the plant. This garage damage was not visible in the November 22nd satellite image and is barely noticeable in the January 4th image. Now let me introduce you to MIT professor Ted Postel, who holds a PhD in nuclear engineering and has extensive knowledge of missile systems, including the LGM-118 Peacekeeper ICBM. With that background in mind, Ted recently gave an interview to Daniel Davis, where he shared his belief that a submunition may have struck the garage building and vaporized upon impact without penetrating the garage floor.
It just vaporized.
Wow.
And created an explosion. That's my guess.
Ukrainian Emergency Services also posted this picture of a building on fire, which is located 3 kilometers away from Pivdenmash. I don't believe this was caused by a submunition, since all 6 submunitions appear to have struck in a linear pattern. You might have expected more widespread damage in this area, but nothing else was reported by Ukrainian media, which typically publicizes any damage to any civilian infrastructure. It's also important to note that on the night of Oryeshnik's attack, Dnipro was targeted by other missiles like Kinzhal and X-101. Speaking of those missiles, here's what the damage looked like from previous attacks on Pivdenmash. I think it's fair to say that the damage from those attacks look far more significant than what we see from Oryeshnik's submunitions. You might be wondering how much damage Oryeshnik could cause in its non-nuclear variant. Well, it's actually a relatively straightforward calculation. The Oryeshnik missile carries 6 warheads, which is verifiable by the 6 distinct strikes visible in this video. Each of these strikes clearly has 6 distinct submunitions, as can be seen on this frame. So Oryeshnik carries a total of 36 submunitions. Russians themselves have publicized that the payload is 1.5 tons. And thanks to President Putin, we know that on impact, the speed is somewhere between 2.5 to 3.43 kilometers per second. Dividing 1.5 tons by 36 individual submunitions gives us a mass of 41.6 kilograms each. So now that we know the speed and the mass of the object, we can calculate its kinetic energy on impact. Traveling at a range of 2.5 to 3.43 kilometers per second, each submunition would produce an explosion with a force ranging from 31 to 58 kilograms of TNT equivalent. Just for reference, a single M795 high-explosion artillery shell contains just over 10 kilograms of TNT, meaning that a single Oryeshnik submunition is equivalent to something between 3 and 6 artillery shells. This means that Oryeshnik's 36 submunitions deliver a total destruction power comparable to 108 to 216 M795 artillery shells. Alternatively, we can compare Oryeshnik's submunitions to the Kinzhal ballistic missile, which carries 480 kilograms of explosives, about 10 times more. I should highlight that we don't know the exact type of submunitions that are being used. If they were inert iron blanks with little to no protective coatings, a significant portion of those submunitions could have burned up in the atmosphere, producing smaller explosions. To survive re-entry, the submunitions would likely be made of tungsten, the metal with the highest melting point of 3,399 degrees Celsius, and potentially with additional classified coatings to further protect the submunitions. It could be that Oryashnik's explosions are not particularly powerful, which would explain why it's so difficult to spot any significant damage in the satellite imagery. Alternatively, it is possible that the submunitions are so powerful that they've penetrated deep underground without leaving any visible signs on the surface. President Putin has claimed that Oryashnik can hit underground bunkers several floors down. However, Professor Postel challenges this by suggesting that the submunitions are traveling so fast that they simply vaporize upon impact, creating only a shallow crater. Historically, the United States government had proposed kinetic weapons like rods from God, which involved dropping massive 8.2-ton tungsten rods from orbit, capable of generating an explosion equivalent to 11.5 tons of TNT. Interestingly, Chinese experiments attempting to replicate the rods from God concept found that extremely high velocities were counterproductive. The munitions would burst in shallow depth, resulting in a contact explosion. Specifically, China launched a 140-kilogram tungsten rod from a classified platform at a speed of 4.6 kilometers per second. The result was a shallow buried underground explosion. As the velocity increases, the effect becomes more like that of a surface contact explosion. Their conclusion was that slowing down the rods would enhance their penetration capabilities. Similarly, Professor Postel argues that submunitions would need to travel below hypersonic speeds in order to effectively penetrate deep underground. But even if Oryashnik's submunitions penetrated deep underground, they would lack explosive power. For comparison, the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator is 20.5 feet long and has a weight of 12 tons. In fact, most of the smaller American bunker busters weigh over a ton. But if Oryashnik was combined with the N-word, it would be a completely different beast. Oryashnik is believed to be able to carry nuclear charges with a total yield of 900 kilotons. That's equivalent to 45 Hiroshimas. But according to President Putin, in its conventional configuration, Oryashnik can achieve a similar level of destructive power when several missiles are launched simultaneously, making the impact comparable to that of a nuclear weapon. But then, the same is true of pounding a hammer or cooking a chicken by continuously slapping it. Let's run some calculations. A small tactical nuclear weapon has a yield of 1 kiloton, which is equivalent to 1 million kilograms of TNT. In comparison, Oryashnik's 36 submunitions would produce an explosion equivalent to 2,088 kilograms of TNT in the best-case scenario. This means that it would take almost 500 Oryashniks to produce a 1 kiloton explosion. Or you could just hit a nail with a hammer 669 billion times and produce the same damage. Silly jokes aside, there is a scary side to Oryashnik. The problem with dual-use ICBMs and IRBMs is that they can carry either conventional or nuclear payloads. But this creates ambiguity. If a country wrongly assumes that the payload is nuclear, it might launch a retaliatory nuclear strike, which would be game over. This is precisely why, before the first Oryashnik attack, Russia notified the United States 30 minutes prior to launch. So there is no ambiguity that it wasn't a nuclear missile. While missiles like Kalibr and Iskander can precisely hit a target within a few meters, ICBMs and IRBMs are fairly inaccurate, with a circular error probability that exceeds 100 meters. The reason for this inaccuracy is simple. These missiles travel at incredibly high speeds, and due to the rapid pace of their flight, there is not enough time for mid-course adjustments. For instance, the American Pershing II IRBM from the 1980s had to slow down from Mach 10 to Mach 3 during its final approach in order to improve accuracy. This adjustment increased its accuracy to a CEP of 30 to 40 meters, but it was still not deemed precise enough. According to open-source information, Oryashnik's CEP is estimated to be between 90 and 290 meters. Even Russians themselves inadvertently confirmed that Oryashnik is not a precision weapon. If Oryashnik was truly accurate and powerful, there is little doubt that Russians would have used it to target key infrastructure such as railway bridges across Dnipro, which would have significantly disrupted Ukrainian military logistics. It seems to me that Oryashnik was used for its psychological impact, which aimed to frighten Western audiences and pressure their governments into halting aid to Ukraine in order to de-escalate a presumably imminent nuclear war. In addition, since the Russians understand that using nuclear weapons would result in catastrophic consequences for everyone, they likely viewed Oryashnik as a step in enforcing their so-called red lines. Speaking of these red lines, within a week of Oryashnik's strike, Russian military bloggers were quick to point out that ATACMS continued to strike Russian targets despite Russia's supposed warning at the Pivdenmash factory. As some commentators highlighted, Russia's brown lines had no effect, and the government chose to ignore or downplay the ongoing attacks in order to avoid appearing foolish. But while Oryashnik's impact on the ground has been debatable at best, only time will show if this missile was really less about the boom and more about the buzz.